Hello, hello. Before we start, no, not yet, not yet, not yet. Before we start, there's this hotel room card that someone lost. Anyone staying at the Hotel AS Lisbon lost a card? No one? Okay, let me know if you. And there's also some sunglasses.
And some keys.
And a wallet full of money?
No.
No. No. Some keys and a pair of sunglasses and a hotel card. From last year, we have a lot of stuff. We have a jersey, we have a bag, we have lots of things. Every year we have a lot of things. A charger, yeah. Okay, let me know if you need the card.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another session of LXMLS. Today, it's my big pleasure to introduce Eric Xing. Eric has done a lot of research in machine learning, computational biology, is the president of the University of AI in MBSY, and also professor at CMU. And today is going to talk about the ladder of intelligence. So join me in applauding Eric.
Okay, let me get started the slides. You can see a little movie, which actually is produced by one of the models I'm going to talk about today. It's called the word model, PEM. First of all, I want to thank the organizers, especially Andre, Mario, many old friends. I remember my last time in Lisbon must be at least 8 years, if not 12 years ago. Also during the World Cup season, I saw people cheering, shouting on the street, which I joined and had a lot of fun. But it's a great pleasure for me to be back here and also see not just old friends, but also my former first student, from this program, Andre, to become now a major player, in the new age of AI. Although old soldiers are not fading away yet, I'm still active. I'm trying to catching up with a lot of the recent exciting directions. So what I report today is not just one model or one algorithm. It's a sequence of ideas. Some are already, being realized. Some are speculations and maybe potential directions that I like people to jointly explore. That's why I call it the ladder of intelligence. It's not one step, but multiple stages of developments. And I want to open like this, right? So many people, especially the general public, believe that even the way AI we have now, such as ChatGPTs, are already very powerful. For example, they can win a gold medal in the Math Olympia, right? And to the point that recently I got a lot of interviews, asking me questions like this. What if we were made irrelevant in the future by the rising power of AI, losing our jobs and so forth? Many of you saw, my answer already, but I'm going to repeat them, in here. My position is that AI is still very primitive, evidenced by, for example, a few easy questions that you guys can all very, very easily answer. For example, my question is that how well the current model, the frontier models, can understand and reason about the world. Let me try to minimize this screen so that they don't occlude my. Okay. So this is the question. I have a picture here, which I tried some time ago with ChatGPTs and all these frontier models. The question is that, is this guy on the left trying to help the lady, on the right, trying to help the lady on the left? That's a simple question. Right? As you can imagine, maybe you can try now. I asked GPT-5. And after some thinking, this is the answer. The GPT-5 is suggesting that it looks like the person on the right is indeed helping. He's kind of quite insistent on that conclusion, which obviously is wrong. And then I asked the GPT-5 think, the more fancy version of GPT, doing deep research and other things. After spending 16 seconds, we get pretty much the same answer. Okay, so these are just examples about how you can trick, even a state-of-the-art AI system in production, into obviously wrong answers. And there are, in fact, many benchmarks even, not the benchmarks you see on AA where, many models are competing, but other more specialized benchmarks. For example, this is a benchmark about spatial understanding, motion processing, and so forth. And you ask questions like this: are these two objects in the same trajectory? Which is really useful, for you to orient it and act properly in real world. Many of these answers cannot get right answer from the GPT models. Right? In a sense, you may want to even further ask, what does it mean by calling some model and some system intelligent? What is intelligence? In fact, I don't know. I don't know what's your answer. To me, intelligence is a very, very subjective, personal question. I believe Einstein is very intelligent because he has this superb capability of abstracting, very deep theory, from worthy observations and using mathematical analysis to come up with a clean, answers and conclusions. And but I also know that Einstein is not very, very how should I say, tidy, in daily life. He forgot about random things, maybe his keys and so forth, right? But that doesn't matter. I still believe he's intelligent. It seems to suggest that maybe memorization is not that important for intelligence. But then I come to other examples. For example, is Wolfgang Mozart intelligent? Well, obviously, people celebrate him as not just a young prodigy, but also a great musician, right? And one of the things that make him famous as a very smart boy is that when he was very young, he went to a church and heard a piece of complex music. And after hearing it once, he was able to come out and reproduce a score with no error and gets the music out of Vatican. And he was actually knighted for that deed, right? So memorization in here played a bigger role. So is that intelligence? Well, you can tell. So in that sense, defining any system, in the dimension of intelligence is not necessarily, a very, very conclusive one that people can easily align. In a sense, the so-called GPT intelligence may not translate to general intelligence as we see from just now, right? So I would suggest thinking a little bit differently, to pull away from the daily rhetoric from the general public, from the media, on intelligence, and focus really on capabilities and utilities of those systems. What do you want to do with all these systems, regardless of their intelligence, in a subjective sense? And this is a view many philosophers take it very, very seriously. For example, David Hume had this very famous quote: utility, the usefulness to society, is the primary foundation of moral approval. Right? So utility is something that you can measure. A calculator is very useful. Whether it is intelligent or not, it doesn't matter. Some people may believe so. Some people don't even care about answering these questions. So with utility, you can now structure and organize needs, and also to score maybe a system accordingly. So this is the starting point. Utility comes from human needs, and psychologists and the social scientists like Maslow studied this pyramid of needs and come up with this proposal of our rising demands. It's already in the form of a ladder that we want people to climb. Accordingly, you can come up with a very, very explicit definition of capabilities, the pyramid of capabilities, starting from maybe basic ability to read and write, to listen, and then all the way up to plan, to execute, to build logistics, and so forth. Maybe all the way up becoming a profit. With all this defined in a measurable, explicit form, you can now start looking at where our current system find themselves. For example, it is pretty clear that the GPTs and the large language models seems to be pretty capable in doing reading and writing. And if you put the audio function, they can also listen and speak. And some of the extensions of these models can also analyze very complex images, but not all, like the one I just showed, and then produce images. And something at the top, prophecy, I don't know, what function, what system can deliver that, but there is a big kind of a space in the middle that is still not quite yet, delivered by GPTs, right? So the question today is about how to, create systems to fulfill these layers of capabilities and functions. The way I want to present, my kind of a vision and plan is to start from the top. Let's imagine, what the. Oh, by the way, before I do that, I want to further position where we are right now. These large language models, as people celebrate these days, as we all know from a technology standpoint, all come from book knowledge, right? They are trained from texts of all kinds in civilization, and they deliver their function and utility also through text. So I would call this type of reasoning and intelligence book intelligence. I don't need to explain more what we mean by book intelligence. For example, if you want to learn how to swim, you cannot learn by reading a book, right? You have to jump into the water and practice. And that already is telling you the limitation of what this intelligence is. They cannot tell you how to swim. In fact, they can tell the logistic of swim. I was last month planning, a mountaineering trip to the Alps. I did consult GPT to prepare the gears and to also set up my training programs before that and the booking hotels and so forth. But when you are on the snow, on the ice, on the rock, you have no GPT to answer your questions. You have to have another level of intelligence and judgment to navigate, right? So you all understand what I mean. So that's basically a level of intelligence in space and time in real physical world so that you can navigate, you can make decision. And this is called physical intelligence. That is not intrinsically built in LLMs. If you want to go further and say, for example, I went to mountaineering with a guide, who roped together with me and navigate and avoid the risk and so forth. And we had a lot of exchange, how to tie the knob and how to control the cadence and so forth. So there are people basically in real world. And therefore you need to know how to do teamwork, how to collaborate, how to understand your limitation, their limitation, and then divide the job accordingly. So again, I don't think LLM is very good at doing that. You don't actually see multiple LLMs working together to solve a problem. It's only one LLM solving everything. Right? So that level of interaction and communication is pointing into social intelligence. Again, we have another kind of ladder to climb. And then with all that, you may want to become a scientist and study natural world, discover, new laws, inventing, new medicines and other things, which basically need you to have all the intelligence at the level below, book, physical, and social, because nowadays in modern science, you cannot just sit in your room and doing abstract thinking to make a major scientific breakthrough. You need to have a lot of field experience, team experience, and other things. So I call them, above all, you also need to have a curiosity so that you ask the right question and also design the right program. So this level of intelligence is what I call philosophical intelligence, built on all the lower level of intelligences. So I believe, talking about the AGI, as many of the, Silicon Valley heroes and the founders were advocating, is more than just building larger and larger LLMs, right? There has to be a structure, in defining both the data and the question, and also the architecture for those systems. So how does such a system look like? Or is that one system or not? So now I want to step back a little bit and maybe ask, if such a system is built, what the ultimate capability that we want to achieve, and then what might be the right approach of achieving that. So I started from a science fiction that you all know, the novel of Dune. Right. So this is a story about a legendary figure, which have really supernatural behavior and capabilities. For example, he can solve very complex problems so that you win a galactic war, right? Or you turn, a desert into the green paradise and things like that. I care less about the problems he solved because it's really too big and too complex. But one thing that is interesting is that how he actually solved those problems. Cuisinart is such a creature that has almost like infinite ability of inheriting knowledge from ancestors. So he basically is made by, accumulating all the knowledge and experience ever happened to his ancestor, and then down to him. And he would use this knowledge to build a simulator. Whenever he faced a new problem, he would do simulation mentally in his brain, and then try out all different strategies and plans. And then one of these plans and options will prevail. Sounds fancy, right? You simulate and then you choose and you optimize. But that's actually what people do all the time. We call them thought experiment, right? Whenever you, for example, when I climb the mountain, before I choose where to lay my finger and foot and so forth, subconsciously or consciously, my brain probably already went through multiple iterations of different options, where I grab and where I move and so forth. So in a sense, you don't run a linear program or a superlinear program to do optimization among many conditions and then get the optimum solution as an outcome. We usually do very, very quick and flexible thought experiments for most of the problems we want to solve. Right? So this is exactly what Cuisinart does, but in a larger scale. I found that's quite interesting because this is exactly what many computers and artificial systems can be very good at doing. Just run a simulation infinitely many times in the infinitely big space, and then pick the best trajectory. Right? So this goal-oriented agent acting in the environment, to achieve a goal, in this style, is something I found to be a good suggestion or a possibility of building the kind of super intelligent agent that we all want to realize. So I'm going to start from here and translate what I want, what I just talked about, into something more tangible and maybe algorithmically computationally more accessible. So let's look at such an agent environment model. You have an agent, you are in a certain environment, and you want to come up with this optimal sequence of actions and states to achieve something, right? The first observation I found is that there is a necessity to have this so-called agent and universe factorization. Basically, one function should be suggesting the action conditioning on the current states, and then the other function should be, predicting the next state, conditioning on the current state and the action that you choose to perform, right? And there are good reasons, more than just mathematical clarity and beauty in this factorization, because these two functions are optimizing two different things. In predicting next states, you want to optimize fidelity. You want to predict as quick and as accurate as possible. But in predicting or suggesting the next action, you want to optimize some loss function, maybe the reward and something else. Therefore, the construction of these two functions are necessarily different. They optimize two different things. Putting them together as a whole makes optimization problem conflated and harder to solve. So accordingly, this is a quick drawing, which is very classic in any of the standard reinforcement learning book. Gives you this architecture for maybe optimal agents, right? And you have an agent which can suggest actions, and the word are represented by states, which can be acted upon with an action to transition to the next states, and then this loop will take place many times, steps, until a goal is reached. And now you have a critique that measures whether you are at the goal or how far you are away from the goal. And the states actually are generated from the universe, right? So that's the ideal abstract setting. And then you already can do some math and figure out mathematically what's the right thing to do. For example, how to extract the optimal sequence of actions. Well, we know from reinforcement learning that you can do so by optimizing the cumulative discounted rewards, for a finite or infinite horizon, and then that gives you the argmax, which is the optimal sequence of actions. So in a sense, once you have the word model and action model, in theory, you can act optimally. Now, get back to our real-world implementation. The thing is that this universe is not always accessible, or maybe too risky and too expensive to access. For example, imagine that you want to build a bot which needs to do certain things on the Mars. Well, we're not on the Mars yet. That means we never can do anything. Well, that's obviously not true, because you can simulate a Mars environment on Earth, right? So that already suggests what people do already. You invent a proxy to the universe that can mimic the behavior and the environment. A flight simulator, for example, is such a proxy. And a world model is also such a proxy of the universe in the digital form. So we start from here to introduce the concept of the world model, because it is going to be a computational and mathematical surrogate of the real universe, which can also output states in response to actions. And then the advantage in here is that because it is virtual and simulational, you can actually do one thing called simulational reasoning, as I described earlier with Krizak, right? You can basically have hypothetical sequence of actions applied to the predicted or simulated sequence of states, and then start to score them based on the closeness of the final states to the goal, and then accordingly decide what action or what sequence of actions are planned to take. So that's why world model is an initial path to now get you away from book knowledge and into the real world with a physical intelligence. So this is the definition of the world model. It's really a generator or a generative model that simulates all possibilities. Because out there, as I'm going to talk about very soon, there are many other so-called world models, which are, for example, Sora was originally called a world model because it can simulate a pretty video, in front of you to make you feel like you are in some virtual world. But there are many problems in that definition, which I'm going to elaborate later. In here, our definition of the world model is a simulator of possibilities, and these possibilities includes physical or mechanic of the real world, embodied experiences, even emotional experiences, social experiences, and more importantly, even counterfactual experiences that may not happen in real world, but could hypothetically happen conditioning on certain actions and environments and all that. In a sense, I think evolution, our very biological world is in some sense also a world model, because our very existence, our trajectory of evolution is not a path of deterministic optimization either. It is simulation through mutation, and then the fitted ones are surviving. So I thought this idea to be rather flexible and generic. Mathematically, it is also very simple. It's basically, in the form of such a conditional distribution of the new states given the previous ones and actions. And I want to reiterate that it is not a video generator for pixel realism. Just like a visually imperfect person could still be a good driver. He doesn't have in fact, I don't have a perfect pixel level vision because I'm aging and my sight is getting down, but I can drive because what you need to make decision in driving isn't just the pixel level resolution. There are many other signals that you can use to make good decisions. So recently I wrote a paper called Critique of World Model, which did a deep dive into both the philosophical and technical definitions of world models, and also some of the recent developments in this space, and also my personal assessment and opinion about those existing work. If you are interested, it's a fun reading, very easy to read, with a few theories that you can pass and still get the main message back. Once you have a world model, you are in a realm which allow you to do very interesting things through a very generic form of reasoning, which I called reason through simulation, or thought experiments. And this is what happens. You are in the current state. Instead of finding the optimum path in your space of all possible actions and a given number of steps that you are allowed to take toward the goal, you basically simulate trajectories using the world model through this sequence of action state generation. And hopefully one of them, if you simulate enough, will get down to the goal or close enough to the goal. And then you are going to choose the best plan accordingly. Okay. So this sounds like pretty straightforward. And in fact, it was realized and utilized in many of the existing systems that we know very well. For example, AlphaGo, as we know, kind of set off this new age of a modern deep learning-based AI. Is actually a world model. The world model is a very trivial one. It is the configuration and the rule of the Go game. Okay, and then the way to play is to basically simulate multiple steps of Go movements and then score them, based on some predefined functions. And then, the trade-off is really about how much computational and time budget you want to spend, in the simulation in terms of the depth and the breadth of the simulation. And that really defines, the power of your performance. But this approach is not limited to only Go, right? You can replace the world model, for example, with a city traffic, and then the same algorithm, simulative reasoning, can allow you to come up with the best driving strategy and movements. If you replace them with a battleground scenario, you can be, a good strategist or a tactician, to really decide how to fight the best battle with your resource and also the battleground situation. You can do other things, for example, simulating the martial environment and build a robot that can survive over there. So this is a definition of the world model that I personally feel strongly to be worthy of pursuing. And of course, out there are many other world models, which I summarized here. I think they pretty much this is an exhaustive summary in terms of the style and the category of existing world models. They range from games, 3D world models for physical navigation, autonomous driving, and robotic manipulation, and so forth. I found that most of these world models are excessively, maybe over excessively focused on good video generation, because that's the best way to communicate the capability, in front of your eye. But it also backfired a bit, because even in my own team, every week I have my stand-up work and a meeting with my team member. I always find that I have to remind them, hey, we're not here to generate videos. We're here to generate, the capability of doing, simulational reasoning. Therefore, you need to give me the actionable latent states, or whatever options that I can act upon. And it turns out that this needs to be reminded, because people easily, get settled onto game generation or video generation, and then focus on the pixel quality and losing really the original goal of the world model. So that's why I found this existing work facing the same challenge. Now, how to build such a world model for reasoning? This is a breakdown of some of the important dimensions that I want to discuss a little bit, maybe one page per element: data, representation, architecture, and objective. I will skip the utility part down to the next session on agents. And there are, of course, many proposals already out there, including some very, very vocal and powerful arguments on how to do each. For example, you probably all know that there is a strong voice advocating against language, but focusing on videos, right? And also there is a very, very popular proposal, on the architecture using something called the JAPA, right? The joint latent embedding. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit and examine, the proposal toward each of these dimensions a little bit more deeply to see what might be the best combination of a plausible solution. In fact, I'm going to show you an example that with this plausible solution, what we can come up with in my team. Data. For some reason, there is a seemingly very, very compelling argument that language data is very limited because the volume is too small. For example, Yang Lekun mentioned that, even for a 4-year-old baby or a kid, her data, her ability to collect data is already exceeding the entire data that you use to train the large language models in terms of volume, right? I found this argument hard to debate because that's fact. Of course, the language model is not very big. Language data is not very big compared to visual data. But if you think deeply, you'll find something very interesting. When we talk about data, it's not just about volume, right? It's also about the density of information. That's why, in a way, we want to send our kids to school to study textbooks, because there are a lot of information in there that is not existent or easily expressible in video. For example, concepts like justice, like moral, it's hard to extract them from watching videos. Maybe you can watch, thousands of hours of video and learn from it, but you can learn quickly from language after reading a few pages, right? And also there are some other fundamental issues, in the bottleneck of a video, which I'm going to show you in a picture, hopefully to explain. And I apologize, this image might be a little bit disturbing. So this is the picture. Many of you who are old enough probably know this picture. This is a Pulitzer-winning picture took during the Vietnam War, depicting, an individual, shooting another individual to death, which create a huge social debate, in the 60s, maybe contributing to the end of the Vietnam War in a certain way, right? So from the picture, what do you see? Violence, right? Gunshots, and the one person killed the other person and so forth. That's how you draw a conclusion. But if you know the context a little bit and read a little bit, the history and the story, you will see that the visual model isn't going to give you the whole picture, right? The truth is that it is taking place, it's a journalist taking the picture on the street of Saigon during the besiege of that city. And that individual on the right is a criminal who murdered a few dozen, government servant and also civilians. and he is a guerrilla leader. And the person on the left is a city defender. He is the general of the security force of the city. And they caught this guy. And out of rage and anger, he executed this, again, criminal. So that's the whole story. The picture, didn't allow you to get all that unless you read the whole picture, but it actually created some very, very unexpected effect. This general, was having a miserable life, after this picture was published. He lost his job. He couldn't really live peacefully for the rest of his life, to the point that the journalist who took this picture later lamented that I used my camera to kill two persons, the one on the right and also the one on the left. Right. So in that sense, what I'm trying to say is that you need to have all modalities and all information to understand the real world, in addition to just the real only video data. So therefore, our first decision is very easy. We're not going to use only video data. We're going to use all modality of data. Therefore, your encoder, your data ingester need to be multimodal, and then your embedding mechanism need to solve the problem of alignment when you actually are computing the representation of real-world signals. The second topic is on representation, how to represent real-world signals. And again, one school have been advocating of using continuous representations rather than discrete ones like the words, because continuous representation allow you to apply gradient-based learning rather flexibly and efficiently. And there are other additional arguments. We did some experiment. First of all, mathematically, if you resort to a continuous compute on the fly representation, they are by definition a stateless representation. Therefore, every time you see a new signal, or maybe the same signal, you need to recompute. You don't have a guarantee that you will fall back to the same states. You have the memory, right? And also the semantics of this compute also can be troublesome. We human beings, I don't think we always do gradient-based reasoning. When I'm falling from the rock and grab something subconsciously, I may be computing using gradient. But when I do abstract reasoning, I probably also do nearest neighbor or token-based symbolic reasoning, right? That's basically why humans are different from animals. So therefore, there are some other problems which is just too difficult for visual signals alone to support the reasoning. For example, I have another interesting question. I want you to do a word model simulation of the apple, what happened to it after a week in room temperature. Can you imagine that you have a word model or any model simulate a week-long worth of video until you get to the final point of a rotten apple? You don't need to do that, right? And we don't do that because we have symbolic knowledge that once you represent knowledge in apple, in dates, and also in some background knowledge of how real world evolve, you actually could quickly jump to the conclusion that after a week, this apple is no longer good. Right? So in that sense, our representation should support this type of reasoning, both in continuous space and also in semantic and stateful space. And therefore, by definition, it has to be a mixed representation with both continuous embedding and also discrete tokens. Again, very, very simple, straightforward conclusion, but requires some mathematical and maybe even philosophical justifications. We do have a theorem, which I'm not going to show here, proving that with a finite token, you actually can get infinitely close to any continuous signal, by building a longer sequence of representations of the tokens, or by expanding the vocabulary of your token size. Thirdly, is the most interesting question: what's the architecture to support such function? That leads to a very famous proposal that is now dominating the space of word model called JAPA, right? Joint Embedding Predictive Architecture. It works like this. It's a double encoder structure that imagine that you have two time steps. This one, as the input, and you want to basically, predict what's happening next. So what happened to the training data of this form is that both the input and the next state will be encoded into latent space. And then the word model in the JAPA definition should be making predictions based on the previous latent representation to the next latent representations. It sounds plausible. Abstract prediction, which is clean, and also computationally you can prove it's very, very cheap, right? But on the other hand, if you look deeper into it, there are some technical, in loopholes, in this architecture. It is first of all, a collapsing predictor. Imagine that I have a trivial encoder which just projects everything into a constant. And then you have a zero error prediction word model, which is obviously bizarre, right? Therefore, you need to do additional things like introducing regularizers to prevent information collapsing and so on and so forth, which actually will drive this very simple model back to a more complex model, but mathematically less elegant because regularizer is a hack. It's not giving you the guarantees of statistical estimation so easily. And then there are other, more fundamental issues because to achieve only latent space high quality prediction, you can do so by losing information to the point that you can lose all information. But even if you have a regularizer, you can lose some information. And therefore, if you have a few shot or zero shot learning scenario in a out of the distribution prediction, your word model wouldn't be able to recognize because information is already lost when you train it, right? So without going further, we find this alternative architecture was exploring. It's called the generative latent prediction. It is going to be, using a full loop, closed circle, architecture where, the first observation is encoded into a latent space, going through, a reasoning backbone, the word model, to predict the next state as what we did in the previous slides. But this particular state is going to be decoded into a predicted observation so that we can compare the predicted observation with the real observation and measure the error, right? So it is a generative model, based on reconstruction error. And in that case, in order to make this prediction as close as possible, you should lose as little information as possible, even including the details. Yeah, but of course there is a caveat of a computational cost, which actually is now not terribly bad through a fancy engineering technique, which I'm not going to talk too much about. So that's the architecture. Mathematically, there's this big headache of the JAPA model, which is this loss definition, right? Which I call to be degenerating. It is mathematically defined like this: the square difference of the two latent states. And your regularizer allows this representation to still carry some information without collapsing. And I said, there are a lot of terrible mathematical behaviors that you have to take care of in working on this definition. And our objective, as I mentioned earlier, is this reconstruction loss in the observation space, which avoids many of the collapsing issue. And in fact, in theory, you can even prove that this latent loss is upper bounded by this generative loss. Therefore, when you minimize the generative loss, you kind of also minimize this as well to achieve what JAPA is intending to achieve. But the reverse isn't true. When you are minimizing this lower bound, you don't necessarily minimize the generative bound, right? So for that reason, we prefer this reconstruction loss as a training function. For those of you who are interested in this debate, it's actually recorded online. I had a fun debate with Yang Lekun about all this. And just to close up the whole story, you can see this side by side, the difference. In a sense, it's very, very obvious about the difference. Right? One is more like a abstract open loop, reasoning, and the other is a closed loop reasoning, focusing more on validation. During the debate, Yang raised a very, very, very profound and interesting issue. He said, when you want to predict the orbit of the Earth, all you need are 6 numbers, okay? And you don't need to have the details of every atom on Earth, which I totally agree. And then he went on and say, that's why abstraction, is what we do. It's very useful, and it's probably the right thing to do. Therefore, these laws, based on observation, is just too messy and impossible and too cumbersome to care about, which is also kind of true. So my push is that, well, you don't know where to stop, when you do abstraction, because your training task and your data represents a scenario that may not be the same when you actually want to use the model. Therefore, I'd rather be respecting the real data in terms of how much I can, reproduce the data. So in a sense, these two philosophy, has virtue in its own right. It's not the right and wrong. It's maybe just a choice. Some people choose to, meditate, in a cave and do abstract thinking and still achieve wisdom and insight. Some other people, maybe a minister, who want to go to the crowd and meet all these noises and again, achieve, wisdom and results in another way. So I just want to present these two, options, and you can decide which one you prefer. For us, we the result I'm going to show later uses this approach. Yesterday, it just came to me that this is more like the Plato and the Aristotle debate, right? Aristotle is and Plato is focused on the form, abstract, but Aristotle is more on the subjects and the real messy real world for classification. Anyway, so this is a fun debate. I want to skip this and summarize with this architecture. So our proposed architecture GLP is a encoder, backbone, and the decoder architecture with some technical nuances in each, right? So here you need to have the mixed representation for both discrete and continuous embedding. And in here, you need to have the backbone that is able to evolve with tokens, but also with continuous signals. So obviously it is a LM/diffusion mixed architecture. And then the decoder, in fact, you can do a lot of tricks to make effective decoders, not to reconstruct every nitty-gritty details of the observation, but focus on the salient content and so forth. I'm going to skip the details and jump to the results. So this is a paper we put up later last year called PEN. It's the first implementation of the GLP. In fact, in a few weeks, we're going to release the second version, which will be bigger and more powerful, but I will show you what this outcome look like. It's very hard to demonstrate that a model really understands the real world because the model doesn't talk to you, right? They will show you some pictures which appear to be understanding, but how can you interrogate? We thought the first way to interrogate it is to steer the model to do things you want to do in real time rather than at the first time point and ask the model to do the rest. So for example, I start from this state, I say, go forward or go upward, or maybe create some weather conditions. And you can see that the world model can comply accordingly and apply the change to the right place, meaning that they probably understand what that place is because I explicitly ask certain actions to happen on certain objects. Second evidence of maybe understanding is this versatility and universality of use cases. Here I use the same model to generate a wide variety of scenarios. Again, they are not comparable to the Google and other products in terms of visual appealing, fancy videos and high pixel resolution and so forth. This is more about actionability, steerability, and also diversity, right? In this scenario, actually caught attention of the Waymo team because they need videos like this to train their self-driving vehicle. And they don't get too many videos in real world of this kind, right? You don't see accidents too often, but they are actually very useful in training autonomous driving vehicles. So now more formally, the benchmark, in the current, world model space, indeed focus more on pixel realism, and maybe short horizon consistency and so forth, which we don't find to be adequate. So we created actually a new benchmark which focuses on the following things. Right. First is action simulation fidelity. You need to simulate a wide range of actions, not for the sake of visualization, But for the, maybe, high quality, influence or the ability to impact the states, in high fidelity form. Long horizon forecast is very important. It's not just 5 seconds or 10 seconds. Can you simulate for 10 minutes or longer? Because to carry long horizon forecast consistently, having a pixel flow is going to be not enough. You eventually will drift away through natural diffusion, or statistical error accumulation. But if you have a symbolic stateful representation of the latent states, it is easier for you to keep, those consistency in the long run. And then lastly, most importantly, the qualification of world model is not about the video. It's about how can you use it to solve some problems, reasoning problems. Can you use pure visual to do reasoning, right? So again, we measured our model against a few other models in quantitative measure, which I'm not going to explain the tables because the details are in the table. I'm going to show a few examples. For example, long horizon consistency and also branching simulations. You can see from here, I take out some snapshots about a few minutes worth of video simulation under different steership, from the middle. You can start from here and say, let's open the portal. Okay, opened. And maybe I could do another thing, walk into the portal and move forward. Make some fancy stuff happening. And do some other spell and so forth. You can see that it appears to understand what I'm asking and then apply the right change, to the contents. But I can also go back to the beginning, okay, and start another branch in here, right, which start from here. So in a sense that when you simulate forward, you don't actually lose your memory. You can actually go back and simulate another thing, which is, again, not what current simulator is doing. They actually only go forward and do not have the memory in their space. Okay, this is a less fancy but important video, which is about actually reasoning, through experimentation, which we watch from the video. The problem is very simple. I started from this state, right? I have 3 trays. There are 4 yellow objects in the middle tray. My goal is to distribute these 4 objects evenly between the middle tray and the right tray. Okay, it's a reasoning problem. How can you do that through simulational experiments? So this is basically what happens, right? Try 3 first step, and they generate different outcomes. And one of the outcomes was preferred, and then simulate next and next and next. Not all the trajectory leads to the right solution, but one of them is. So this is basically imagining, a thought experiment that I can use the world model to do. Maybe this is not so fancy, but imagine you are in a maze. You want to walk out of the maze. You don't just walk and test all the paths, right? You probably do some thought experiments and then imagine, which one leads you the best path. That's basically what we want the world model to do. Okay, so I think I'm slower than I expected, but I want to race against clock and give you another dimension of the work that is going on based on my recent paper. So we have the goal of building the agent. We have a world model already, and there are a lot of agents out there, right? Listing here. My first question is that are they even getting closer, to our goal of building an autonomous being that is able to execute, complex tasks? If you look closely, all these, systems that is self-labeled as agents are no more than, a fancy automation program, automata, which aims at finishing a job, or use tools. But does it really suggest agenthood? Right. So let's take a look. Right. So we have, LLM agents, doing coding, doing, web browsing, and some people are inventing co-scientists, which basically is also about executing a scripts and run different experiments. Now, if you, examine a person in terms of his kind of function as an agent, you'll find way more capabilities. For example, I can go do mountaineering, right? And which is recreational, but also difficult. You can also, have a way of social understanding. You can sometimes even do nothing and just seek your own well-being and so forth, right? So these are, very, very typical to human. In a sense, in this one body that we all have, we do many, many things with one system, our world model or our agent model. Versatility, adaptation, and all these, really are the signature of agenthood. But is that enough? Can we just compile all these functions into one system and call it an agent? Maybe this is happening with the existing companies. If you ask the philosophers what is agent, they have more to offer, right? They say that a rational agent is first and foremost built on rational reasoning, and then built upon that autonomy and the free will and other things. Therefore, they have a intrinsic drive and inspiration and many other things that is not coming from outside, but coming from inward, right? So self, definition, reflection, regulation, determination, all that, are actually the hallmark of human agency. So in a sense, the agents, the so-called agents we see for now, are literally based on external scaffolding, of scripts, engineering design, and so forth. Unfortunately, they already occupy the word agent, agentic. So I would keep that word without debating. So the agentic system we see, their competence resides in engineering of external tools and workflow. For the shortage of the right word, I suggested a different word called agentive systems, which focus more on the internal synthesis. Their ability, should arise endogenously from their intrinsic internal organizations. And this is really what I meant by this little agent that we want to build to achieve higher capabilities. Accordingly, the definition of an agent model, can be like this, right? It is a model that allow autonomous, self-regulated reasoning, to take place, for purposeful, planning and action, towards certain goals. The goal can come from self or from external, but the way to achieve there should have a great degree of autonomy. And then they can have all these functions I listed in here, including, many things, adaptation, learning, and so on. Mathematically, this is the formula. It's a predictive model, coming from, of the next action, given the previous state, but also a few new things, the goal, the identity, and the word model. And I recently put up another paper called Critique of Agent Models, detailing some of the rationales and design behind it. In case you are interested, you can take a look, but I'm going to quickly dive into that, how to build it. Again, I put this material just in a rush in the next few days, so forgive me if I'm stumbling, in the presentation. So here are the 5 dimensions I found to be interesting and needed, for the autonomous agent: goal, identity, decision-making, self-regulation, and planning. And again, there are common wisdoms on each of these dimensions in the current, space of agent systems, which I'm not going to elaborate line by line. I'm going to directly jump into the critique. The goal. Currently, most of the models take one goal directly from the players, and then come up with maybe a plan or maybe a strategy against that, right? And the problem with that is that you cannot set up very complex goals. For example, you can ask the agent to maybe the bot to pick up a bottle for me, right? But when you say, "Oh, go make a wine over a year," I don't think any agent know how to do that because it's too long and too complex, involving multiple steps. So for that, we propose to have a very explicit internal function called the goal decomposer, which can hierarchically break bigger goals into sub goals. And that requires the word model to be in the play, because in order to make sure that your sub goal makes sense, you better simulate it with some potential action sequences to see whether they drive you toward the next state that is closer to your final goal or not. Identity is an important thing. we human beings have a strong sense of identity. In the simplest form, it translates to my physical capability, my limitation, right? And my energy and my budget and so on and so forth. And this comes internally. Nobody needs to tell me who I am, or at least I don't count on that entirely. And also it's changing because, for example, if I have a long day hike, in the mountain, the next day, my assessment of my energy will change, right? The current agents are not built like that. They usually depend on an external prescribed list of parameters to set up their limitation and boundary. And then they will basically carry out their work regardless of the change. What we are proposing for an agent, for an agentive agent, is to have a model of self called identity model, which can quickly update the state of your self-affordance, your self-capability, and resource, and so forth. So this is not about retrain the model from scratch and changing all parameters. It is just a tiny model within the bigger model, only worry about identity. And this can be happening in a fast learning mode. In a sense, this whole agent system can have both a fast and a slow learning mechanism. And we have some theorem proving that this mechanism will strictly allow you to achieve a better learning outcome. Thirdly is the decision making. Again, most of the decision making mechanism right now focus on training black box policy, which is a state action mapping. And optionally, you can have a chain of thoughts for long reasoning, but these are all prescribed. And they may or may not pay attention to the real consequences in the real environment and do changes accordingly, right? And also, it's very hard to train because to train black box policy, you need to have a sufficient amount of demonstration examples and the rollouts, which cannot be too long and difficult to collect. It is not making use of any existing world model, for example, a simulator, to generate more data. So our proposal is to really double down this simulational reasoning mechanism, not only as a tool for inference, but also as a tool for learning. Because if you have a world model that is able to simulate with a high quality or even reasonable quality about the real world, you don't want to just put it aside and activate it only when doing inference. You can actually do training based on simulational experience with world models. In fact, if you're a Go player, you learn by reading books. You also learn by playing with opponents, but also you learn by self-playing constantly based on your current world model of the Go, right? So that's the idea. A combination of a policy-based reasoning and also simulational reasoning. Again, we have a theorem showing that this will lead to a better policy. Self-regulation is another thing. It's a hallmark of human agency. We not only know what to do, but we also know what not to do, and also how much we want to do it. That kind of a self-restriction and a self-restraint and regulation is not yet common in not maybe present in current agentic systems. Basically, current system it rely on the external directions to decide which algorithm I invoke to solve the problem. Maybe a black policy, a black box policy, or maybe an MPC, a model prediction, optimization, to make the next decision. But they don't necessarily pay attention to the trade-off of the cost and also the quality of the outcome. Self-regulation means that you have a configurator which, depending on the situation and the budget, you can switch between the so-called system 1 reactive reasoning and system 2 simulation reasoning, and then achieve the most cost-effective solution in real play. Right. So this configurator is again an additional component that allow you to do self-regulating of deliberation and resource. And again, you can prove that this will strictly lead you to a better outcome, and also more efficiency toward alternative approaches. And last, I think I can quickly go skip learning again. You can learn both by simulation and also self-supervision, or example-based demonstration. So with that, I want to wrap up with a proposed architecture which we call the GIC, the Goal, Identity, and Configurator Architecture, which allows you to really decompose complex goals into hierarchy of sub-goals, use identity to decide what is the best action you want to take, use a configurator to determine what algorithm you want to use to compute the best actions, and so on. We have some limited empirical evidence of this idea working. It's not as exhaustive as the world model, but some smaller versions. I'm going to be done in 3 minutes. For example, in simulation reasoning, we were able to show that the world model grounded simulation reasoning really improve along against agent planning across a wide range of tasks. And also it's going to give you, a much stronger, completion rate, regardless, of in a wide spectrum of, complexity of a problem counted in a number of constraints. And we were able to achieve strong performance in textual reasoning space with this agentive architecture, using a much smaller model with a comparable performance, against models which are like 10 to 30 times bigger, and with all the harness tricks and so forth. So that's the evidence of effects of self-regulation and simulative reasoning. And now we are in the stage of combining, the world model together with the agent model to train, the next iteration. The world model, as I show here, can simulate a wide variety of long horizon scenarios. It becomes an infinite source of a data generator. And then my agents, can leverage on this infinite amount of, visual, or sequential, real data, continuous data, to train complex behaviors, as we can see here, opening door, finding the path, and playing certain tools and so forth. So to conclude, this architecture is designed to be flexible and also extendable. For example, why it's called PEM, right? We have the P, which is physical intelligence, and A, agentic intelligence, and N actually means nested, because you can imagine that now your virtual world model may contain not just the physical kind of knowledge, but also many agents inside this world model. Therefore, you can build a super world model on top of it, right? And then given a super world model, the agent can have a super agent in his brain, which can simulate more complex behaviors, such as like an economist. He is trying to figure out the behavior of the market, which contains millions of people, in the play and in certain transactions. That's the kind of super intelligent capability that you can build based on this nested world and agent models. I'm going to skip this safety issue unless you want to discuss in offline, and conclude with these final slides. So this is just a review of what I mean by the ladder of intelligence, going above language into physical world, into agentic world and natural world. And we proposed these two architectures, GLP and GIC, respectively for the world model and the agent models that we are making. And I'm hoping that this will create the new frontier and also new questions, both in engineering implementation, but also in theoretical foundations of understanding AGI, or machine learning at larger scale. So with that, I'm done with my presentation. Thank you for the attention. A few questions.
Thank you so much. I have a question about what do you think, like using limitations, like intrinsic limitations of agents, how does it affect on its performance? Do you think like it somehow like if we build an analogy with human agency, does it affect for an agent to make more creative decisions or?
Are you talking about the limitation of our proposed, agentive agent or the existing agentic agents?
Proposed.
The
Yeah,
proposed ones.
there was a formula with probability of the next action is based on state and then identity, which included limitations.
What's the limitation? Well, any system has limitation, right? So, for example, I don't know how to answer this question because it's pretty obvious that the agent, for example, if you don't have enough training data, it couldn't achieve good capability, and also you could imagine even architecturally they lack. Maybe I can be more practical. This is still a abstract agent or a virtual one. How to basically, deliver its action and outcome to a real interface, like a game or a robot.
Oh, sorry. I don't think like I meant the formula with probability, which is of action based on state and then identity. And maybe I misunderstood what identity means, but I thought that it includes some like self-regulations, like meaning like limitations of what it's going to do, not limitations of like on how much data it was trained. Of course, it's limited, but like you impose some identity on it, so it somehow limits it, no?
It's I think we can take off. This question is very hard to answer. We don't even implement yet, and why are you talking about imitation? It's you can ask Elon what's the limitation of his Starship. Well, let's first make it happen. The limitation that it doesn't go fast enough. So I can get countless limitations. For example, with this bigger system is very expensive to build. It doesn't run fast enough.
I'm
It's
sorry,
not
I
on your
didn't
iPhone,
receive
right?
that.
So can we be more concrete, like what specific you want to do, and then I can tell you what I can do or not.
Oh no, it's not a question about that.
Mm.
Sorry, maybe I'm not clear enough, but I didn't mean that kind of limitation. Okay.
Yeah, because limitation is a very, very generic word. Everybody has limitation. It's hard to describe what my limitation is on yours, right? So, yeah,
Yeah.
it can help me by grounding that a little bit.
Can we move to the slide with that formula? Maybe clearer. Yeah, identity part. I think there was a something that identity included, some words. Okay, sorry, I'll just move on.
It's the identity state. It's the identity state. It's a state of your identity. For example, my battery level is at 30%. That's identity, right? And I have $100 in my pocket. That's also a part of my identity. It's basically who I am in terms of a measurable set of metric. Well, the limitation is that you can never go infinite. Therefore, you have to basically do a trade-off. If you have a two metric, maybe my pocket size and also my battery level, then by definition, it's already a limitation because it's only 2 dimension, right?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And my second question was on how does it affect explainability of a model? Because when we make like hundreds of thought experiments, we can like track back to like how model reasoned. But when we rely more on more intrinsic abilities, like does it negatively affect explainability or?
That's a very good question. In fact, many people ask this. Here is my answer. At this stage, at this particular stage of AI, and at least in my opinion, explainability is not the priority. At least that's my decision, or maybe many people's decision. Because if you have a few billion or trillion parameters, explainability is very, very, confusing and evasive, right? It's not actionable, right? How can you even, make any decision out of a few billion parameter? What you care is the results, the outcome of that, and the repeatability and reliability of that. In a sense, modern deep learning focuses on that. It's the end-to-end outcome and experiences. Imagine that I often use this example of Louis Pasteur's vaccine invention. Okay, when vaccine was invented, we don't know DNA yet. Okay, we don't know modern molecular biology. There is no plausible explanation, at the true scientific level. But there are strong empirical evidence that it worked, and it's worked very reliably. I think machine learning or AI right now is in that stage. The explaining question will be asked maybe sometime later when we repetitively and also are convinced that this system really, really worked and in large use already, then people are willing to invest more money to find out those. Right now, before the system is even stabilizing and also become a common table stake, asking explainability, in my opinion, is counterproductive. It slows down things. Yeah.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
clear.
in a sense, I don't have explainability. That's also why I have to be sarcastic in here. The study of causality, in machine learning is as old as machine learning. And you can see that until now, they are still talking about 3 parameters and 4 vectors and so forth, which is very, very theoretical in the sense that they have little to do with how we design current machine learning framework, right? So I think that right now, the whole paths are not converging yet. They're in parallel. That's why I couldn't answer that question, because my priority is to make the system work first.
That's all right. Thank you.
Yeah.
No, you can go first. It's okay. You can go first because I think you want to answer in the same.
Yeah. So to continue on that, don't you think that by investigating explainability, we can build intuition that can help us find models that achieve better results?
Ideally, yes. Yeah, but there is always a compromise. It's about how much you can get out of it. And unfortunately, we've been working on machine learning like that for many decades, including my majority of my career. It didn't deliver powerful enough results. And it is this large language model, this transformer, and this new modern architecture of word models that is delivering results. So it's a choice. It's not the only answer. But I don't think right now explainability-driven research is going to quickly take over what is being happening now, in the large language model and the foundation model space. I've been very candid because it's dirty. It's very, very engineering heavy. It is not very elegant, but it worked. Yeah.
But shouldn't we be concerned to get lost in all of the engineering tricks and just, I'm not sure if
that's philosophical. I think you should enjoy the results first. Because I asked the following question to my colleagues, right? So when you go to Rome and walk into Pantheon, you always feel very safe. You don't worry the building collapse, right? But remember, when the people building this building 2,000 years ago, they don't know Newtonian mechanics and all that. There's no mathematical theory behind it. They build it. It's a different way of innovation. I want to say that the innovation discovery is not one path, that you always go to the Kantian, Newtonian kind of a philosophy that is going forward from math reasoning all the way down. There is a whole path from Aristotle and David Hume, which is empiricism. You do experiments and it work, and then you realize it, right? So this whole idea of a simulational reasoning that I made as a foundation of this talk, simulational reasoning by Kwezak is not first principle. It is empiricism, right? And I think if you look at the history of science, these two approaches alternates. It's not like one thing dominates. We currently are at the end of the first principle reasoning dominates. But I think at least evidence from deep learning and the modern AI, you see a alternative already.
Yeah, but I'm not against experiments. I just think that if the experiments are too complex and too verbose, you're not learning stuff. You're just, oh well,
Yeah,
maybe it's better to leave it. Maybe.
No, it's just a fair competition. You know, people have options. I can tell you that no drug is designed by first principle, right? Because you cannot come up with the chemical compounds at the atomic level, compute its effect, and then compute its outcome on the cell and disease, and then go forward. It's always by the backward experimentation. It worked. And in fact, our entire life is built on that.
Okay. Thank you for your answer
Thank you.
and for your lecture.
Thank you. Please.
Okay, so thank you for the incredible talk, by the way. It was really interesting. It really summarized like the entire field of world models, like really, really nice summary. I also want to say that the kind of dichotomy between the two architectures reminds me of extroverted and introverted thinking by Carl Jung, which kind of like developed these personality theories. And I wanted to ask you basically, I've been kind of into agentic AI, and basically the agents that we are seeing are kind of developed for very task specific things, you know, for example, to add like an extension to a browser, to add like an event to a calendar. So it's always very task specific. So chatbots, maybe to open the help desk tickets.
Yeah.
And they work very well because the engineering is geared towards like a specific task. So we can develop very specific specific algorithms. So it's very easy to engineer. So it's really hard to develop the internal organization that you were speaking of. So is it an incredibly hard challenge? And I think what are basically the things that you were able to achieve? So this requires like basically development of concepts, reasoning,
Yeah.
cognition. It seems to be everything needs to be done to be able to achieve this internal organization. So how can we generalize better?
Yeah, it is incredibly hard. Yeah, I agree. You know, that's why we study this topic quite deeply. You know, in the past few months, and propose this new architecture. I think it's still achievable, but step by step, right? You don't have to be universal on everything, but you can zoom in one domain and focus on the mechanism. For example, our first agentic bot is only doing web browsing. But we can focus on the cost of compute, the token cost of web browsing and the answer summarization, by trying, say, a self-regulated approach, which allows you to switch between, a pre-made policy-driven action versus a simulation reasoning and see, how much compute saving you can achieve. So I think this is a typical, structured engineering approach, step by step, and each time you focus on one or few dimensions. And also in terms of applications, we are doing the PEM word model, only in right now a robotics space and also in a limited game space rather than, a climbing agent, in the mountain and so forth. So I think that's the engineering decision that we make. But I can also reflect, in fact, this is the first time I talk about our agent paper, why I do it. People may wonder, because I didn't like the way, people gets misled by this word agent. Many people come, including head of states and the very, very important people, come worried. In fact, we also have Turing winners worry about agent getting out of control and going after you. It makes people, because by calling everything an agent, it gives you that kind of illusion that, they may be really an agent. And by doing more and more, they develop their identity and self and maybe their will so that they can't harm you, right? Without even looking into what it takes to get to that point. And are we really on that course of going there? Then now you look at all these agents. Well, then you realize that these existing agents, without external scaffolding, they cannot do anything. Okay, there is no such a thing called brain, that is autonomous inside the agent. Therefore, expecting them to jumping into a agency-like behavior obviously it's impossible, but without doing this analysis, you cannot convince people. That's how I started this writing in the first place. My example is like, can you put a pile of chemical compounds and then say, in theory, they could rise into an animal after some time? Well, it's not possible. You lack conditions. You lack many of the architecture and designs. That's basically what's wrong with the current agent. This word has been heavily, heavily abused. These automata, are not agents. There are some basic criteria you have to meet, of agency and agents, which are internally, synthesized functions and capabilities, which are not there, right? That's the original drive. Then, of course, I went on and say, what if I want that? And how to build it? Then the proposed structure. But I did have a slice about where we should worry and what to fear. Because, as you said, in a sense, it offers some causality clarity, in the function. You have, after all these building blocks, and you also know where their capability arise and come from. For example, the goal is never originated from the agents. It's given by the other people. Therefore, if something goes wrong, well, just like if a pistol killed a person, is that the pistol who is the criminal or the person, right? Very obvious. So I believe that all this worry about the agency harming people and so forth, there's a human behind it. You need to look after the human.
Yeah, for sure. I'm afraid of what governments might do with the agents. So yes, we should be scared about humans as well.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask you, I've heard like neuroscientists say that brains don't do gradient-based learning. Also, did you look at the neuroscience to see if you could be inspired by that as well? So just
Well, people do gradient. I'm not saying that I say people don't only do gradient-based learning. Gradient-based learning gives you fast response of signals, which we usually say muscle memory, subconscious actions. We have survival, instinct. And I think those instincts come from gradient. It's fast. But when we say, I want to solve a piece of mathematical problem, I want to figure out a philosophical puzzle, I don't think that's gradient. It has to be symbolic reasoning, right? And that's why I found, again, from rational argument, the pure gradient-based reasoning to the point that you even want to build a representation to support only that, it's not going to work. It makes a very, very compelling argument for the outsiders, but if you really build it, it's not going to work. That's why, in this paper, we took some lengths to dive into it, to dissect the whole kind of inner, anatomy, of the system, to the public.
okay, thank you so much.
One last question, maybe.
Yeah. So you mentioned there is a connection, and I mean here. Hi. So you mentioned there is a connection of causality, of course, and I agree that the field of causality is trying too much of requiring like identifiability of the structural causal model. And as I understand here, you are trying to break, like saying that you really don't need identifiability and maybe. So my question is like, are you trying to understand the conditions on what maybe you have this equivalence class where the model behaviors similarly to the reality?
Yeah, maybe I should walk back a little bit from my claim of causality. I think this model, in a sense, offer a very coarse granular causal kind of a rationale. At least you know that the action comes from certain states, the identity comes from somewhere, and then the next action and the next state come from somewhere. And then this is what I call actionable causality. Every of this state, boils down to a specific variable in the model, or maybe a unit. You can do something, retrain it, improve it, and so forth. But it is not the how should I say, the orthodoxical level of causality where every number in this whole system has a cause or has a deep meaning. They may have, but we just don't know what they are, right? In terms of representation, identifiability, invariance, and so forth, that's even deeper. No one, in fact, is able to study, in a over-parameterized latent space what the identifiability even mean. It's not anymore, a deterministic, mapping projection of something as we talk in the very, very idealistic geometrical world or pluralistic world. I think we are somehow in a very, very strange kind of universe, in this large language model where there isn't a very, very good complete set of mathematical theory, to dictate at that level of details, a particular state. Are they unique? Are they identifiable? Can you guarantee, repeatability when you put the same signal? In practice, maybe they achieve that, but there's little theory study those. So I would say the priority is to get it work first.
Yeah, thanks.
Sorry, it's been a long evening, but it's fun discussion.
Okay, yeah. Thanks everyone for the questions and thanks for the talk. So just a reminder that we have the banquet at 7:30. So in the Casa do Alentejo, you can see it in the map in the website. Thanks, Eric, for the talk, and see you soon in the banquet.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's a bit chaotic in here.
I agree. When this debate you have with Jan, it was recent.
Yeah, it was very recent.
It was after it was recent. Jeff worked with Jeff and all that.
Yeah. It was online. In fact, it was the Morocco summer spring student. Yeah. Then neither him or me can make it to the place. No, we decided to do online. Yeah.
Oh, will you be able to come to the banquet? You don't know.
I probably won't be able to. Looks like the time is late. I need to go back and have a quick dinner and then jump to the conference.
Okay. Okay.
But it's okay. And I think
Okay.
no, I think
If I don't see you again.
yeah. But thanks for having.
It was great.